Happy Saturday. Welcome to the Marketing Madmen. Nick Constantino here, and we have a great show. We got my boy here, Cassius Butts, and I'm going to introduce him. I was going to introduce him, but he's got so many damn qualifications and things he's accomplished that I ain't going to even try to read all that stuff. So, Cassius, my man, first off, how you doing, brother?
I'm on top of the world, Nick. Glad to be
here. Good to have you. All right, so first, give the quick run-up. Let's list all these things out, and then since we know each other so well, I'm going to start picking that things apart and asking you random questions to see if I can throw you off.
Sounds good to me. I guess really depends on the day of the week, like you just said. First and foremost, I'm head of capital, or actually head of capital for Global Leader Group, the managing partner there. We help large and mid-sized businesses with access to capital. I've been doing that for a few years now and enjoying it. I'm an equity partner there. We're based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. I have an office here in Atlanta, Georgia. I also have a chance to do something pretty cool. Founded a company called Capital Fortune Business Advisors. We help folks to scale and get to that next level. I don't do the day-to-day that anymore. Someone comes in and does that. As Dr. Tyra Pades. Glad she's running that ship. And like you said, been on day of week. Now in an adjunct professor.
There you go, man.
Yeah.
There you go.
Talk about that. Teach leadership and professional development. And so I really enjoy it. I mean, I feel like I learn more from them than they get from me. I don't know. It's just I learned about what's taking place in the world.
And we're going to get to that because we actually got one of our interns over here at Diggy Broadcast and Chloe in here also. So I'm curious what they're teaching these kids these days. I'm curious what kind of problem solving they're getting. I'm seeing a little bit in real time now, but we will certainly get to that. Let's go back a little bit further. Let's talk just briefly, talk a little bit about your upbringing, your college career, and then how you started working with the government, because that will bring us all full circle to a lot of this stuff we're going to be talking about.
Oh, certainly. So I come from a family of entrepreneurs. My grandparents they had their own construction business. My father was an engineer by trade. He worked for then Lockheed Martin, which then was Martin Marietta. My mom, she owned a daycare. She was in banking and she was an educator. She became an entrepreneur. And so for me, I got a chance to learn entrepreneurship as a kid.
Lots of different sides too. The engineering side, that's a lot of different parts. Yeah.
Sales, networking, all nine. And really, I learned how to be uncomfortable as a kid.
Yeah.
Right. And so my brother and I, we started businesses, cutting grass, selling fruit drinks, the whole nine. But born out in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, finished high school in Orlando, Florida, came to college in Atlanta, Georgia. And so for me, I got to see the best of really the world had to offer.
Very different places. Yeah. Philly is one of my favorite places on earth, but if you've never been there, there ain't nothing like it. Right. Like the kind of grind and the grit and the hustle that they have in that place, and they're proud of Philly. Right. And I'm not saying it's not a nice place, but I'm saying most people from other parts of the country go there and they're going to be a little off put by what Philly has to offer, but in such a good way. Second of all, it's also, I grew up in New York my whole life. It's such a good food town. It is so expensive. You can eat like a king in Philadelphia. There's BYOB places everywhere. I was at a Malaysian spa at 4 o'clock in the morning with food and BYOB in Philly. Like that's just the kind of stuff. But anyway, so Morehouse for college.
Getting Morehouse for college. And to your point, Nick, either you love or hate Philly. There's no
exactly.
Between. Either you love it or you hate it. But came down, went to college, Morehouse. I wanted to be an industrial organization psychologist. Basically, I wanted to be the shrink inside the corporate setting. But I realized that.
Wow, at that young of an age. I only found out, I thought my whole life, I just don't like what shrinks do, period. But I thought my whole life now, I'd never wanted to be that. Now I'm so curious of the inner workings. Now that I think I'm in a leadership position, and really all life is about is finding what motivates people. Yep. And to do so, I think sociology only gets you so far. Knowing how people work together can only get you so far. What gets you the rest of the way is knowing real psychology and how to motivate individual people. And it feels, for me personally, the hardest part of my career now is finding those inner workings of people.
That's right.
Isn't it the hardest part? Because realistically, what I want is, do it the way I do it, because that's what I'm comfortable with. But realistically, that is the opposite of psychology works and is very hard to work. So I find it funny that at such a young age, you knew that's what you wanted to be. Has that influenced a lot of what you've done to this point?
Probably so. I mean, I thought that
even subconsciously, you're right. Maybe not, but
I mean, my brother and I, we grew up watching television with my dad. We watched like Columbo, Quincy, MD. And then we watched like the game shows. We watched all the things that made people, what motivated them to do whatever they did.
Yeah.
So for me, I was like, hey, how can I motivate people inside the workplace and be compensated and feel good about it? And that's how it really came about. I never figured that it would come to this point. As
sure.
Wrote a book called Exceptional, and we're going to talk about that. But I really kind of wanted to figure out, what can I do with trying to influence people?
Yeah.
I didn't know if that was going to be like in a corporate setting, that was going to be in a pulpit, or that was going to be somewhere like, I don't know, singing in a bar, playing the piano. I mean, just making people laugh. So you got to understand, Nick, I grew up listening to everything from Barry Manilow to Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Yeah.
I can tell you, think about psychology. Barry Manilow had the song and said, "Doctor, my woman's coming home later today. Can you maybe give me something? Because the feeling's gone and I don't know how to get it back again." That was Barry Manilow. I learned that at 7. And I was like, oh, what's this guy talking to? And I asked my dad. I see he's talking to a therapist.
Viagra didn't even exist yet, so that's not what he was asking for.
He's like, yeah, he's trying to figure out what his relationship. Well, why is he talking to him? It's like, because things are not going right. It's like, you got to talk to people about that? He said, yeah. I said, I may be interested in wanting to do that. That's how it came about.
And look, let's be clear. Life is about relationships. Life is about rapport. And the easiest way to gain rapport is to find common ground and speak things in common. You have a similar upbringing to me, a lot of well-traveled, a lot of places, a lot of different industries, a lot of interests, a lot of different types of music. And what I find when people ask how to succeed at sales, the number one thing I say is diversify your background. And the reason is because it's about finding something in common with someone. If you grew up in one place your whole life, did one thing, listen to one type of music, how easy is it going to be to find something in common with someone? That's not what people want to hear. They shouldn't hear that's what you do in sales. It's, well, do this and you should. No, man, the more things you've done, the more chance you have to find one thing that you relate with somebody. All right. So let's talk about, you got into the government. Okay. I met you just as you were either coming out of it, but you started in the Bush administration. You were with Obama. And now you're in statewide with Kim. Talk a little bit how you got into the government. And then I got some questions here because I think that's a fascinating part. And hopefully make sure you're still on your feet because that was a long time ago, brother.
It was like it was yesterday. I'm reminded about it often. My grandfather, my dad's dad, he actually ran for mayor of the city of Orlando in 1980. And
Orlando was quite a different place in 1980 too, right? I mean, you're talking to come up. Did Epcot exist yet? I don't think Epcot existed yet.
It just yeah. Years. In fact, my grandfather was responsible for the community engagement aspect with the city of Orlando and helping people to accept Disney into their backyards. Literally, he was that ambassador.
Wow, I wonder what he thinks of what's been going on recently with DeSantis and trying to get him out of there. Yeah, I can imagine.
Oh, man.
Once that presidential bid ended, though, DeSantis was like, oh, no, I'm just kidding. I like Disney again. How quick that changed. Anyway, the hypocrisy.
No, but I saw my grandfather do it, and just watching him navigate and saying, again, asking my dad, what's grandpa doing? He's running for mayor. What's a mayor? Just going through all these questions. And so seeing what he did, and I was like, hey, that's pretty interesting. But even to move further with that, I just always thought I was in a position to influence people. I figure I had a superpower, use it in the best way that's going to make a positive impression on folks,
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, it's ordained. I mean, I grew up, in the Catholic Church as a kid with my brother, and then we moved to Florida. We became, I guess, Baptist when football season was in place because we went to church with my mom. So we wouldn't, had to be there all day. But, my dad, in Catholic church, you're there for like 10 minutes, and it's great.
Yeah.
In Baptist church, you're there all day.
Yeah.
So we would go to church with my mom.
I grew up Greek Orthodox, and it was like 4 hours. Then you go to Sunday school, and then I went with my wife once. I'm like, what, 45 minutes? I go, this is a way better deal.
So to all the end, really, I just said, hey, how can I influence people? And just seeing my parents work really hard and being an entrepreneur, my grandparents that love what they did. I was like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
And I just always figured it would be either in a corporate setting or behind someone's pulpit or something like that. I guess there was this different plan for me, Nick. As you mentioned, government, I was good at working with people, talking to folks, met some good folks here in the city of Atlanta, said, hey, there's a calling on your life. You should help people to get to where they want to be. I never really got involved in the politics per se.
Yeah.
I got involved in the business aspect.
But remember, politics is a relatively new thing. When you were speaking government back in the day, there was not this politics. There was not this device, which is actually, you just segued me perfectly. You might have read the script in advance. So let me ask you this. So you worked for HUD, for Housing and Urban Development.
Yeah.
Okay? That is one of those things, unfortunately, that has been stigmatized and politicized.
Yes.
Right? So what it originally stood for was when they were building urban areas and planning, and urban, again, people, that word has even been destroyed. Yes. Like dense cities. I'm talking about urban. When they were building, there were ways to plan and build and put certain resources in places. Yep. Okay. Now let's not forget what happened with redlining in the African-American communities and how they were devastated by this in food deserts. Yeah. I don't want to go into that, but I do want to say that the point of HUD is to make a functionally operational city.
That's right.
So talk about your role there, what you learned there, and some of what's happening now and why you think it's been so politicized. And we might go to the break on this one because it's a pretty intense question, but.
No, really, it was an opportunity where I said, hey, I want to influence. And so there was an opportunity to apply for a presidential management fellowship. I applied, 10,000 people applied, 400 were accepted nationally. And so I was accepted as a presidential management fellow during the Bush administration, which means I got to be fast-tracked to learn every aspect within each department of HUD.
Wow.
Knowing that at the end of that training period, that I would be in a position to lead it. And so very proud about that. Folks knew about what my grandfather started during that time. A lot of his colleagues were folks who were also appointees in the Bush administration. So it just was a great time. And for me, I was like, okay, this is what I really enjoyed this. But to your point, it's been politicized, and to the point I came into HUD when Katrina happened. So the regional administrator said, hey, his name was Bob Young, former mayor of the city of Augusta. He said, Cassius, I need for you to help me to show me these different areas I haven't been to. And I said, okay, great. And he said, no, one day I think you're going to be a regional administrator like me. And I was like, yeah, you think so? He was the first one to call it. And so I was very proud to work with Mayor Young. We did a lot of great things at HUD. What we did was help people, get people in homes for the first time. What we could have done a lot better is saying two things. Hey, today's not your day.
Yeah.
Get yourself together. And the second thing, do not accept that loan, because you need to learn how to actually use those funds before actually accepting them.
Yeah, there's two sides to the story. It's not get the people who are predatory with the loans. It's educating the people to know what to stay away from. There's always two sides, because no matter what, as many resources the government puts, there's going to always be people that are smarter and slicker chasing the mighty dollar, which the government is never going to pay. So I agree. And it's part of the problem. We always say, well, let's overregulate. How about we teach the people how to not be in these situations in the first place? Right. So I completely agree. And I do remember, so one of the Katrina, for me personally, and again, I'm not from the South. Sure. I'm a New Yorker. So race is a little different up there. Everybody's just trying to make a dollar. You don't know, like, I was probably the only white kid in the whole neighborhood in Queens. Everyone was Korean. That's why I was like, no, I'm Puerto Rican. I swear to God, don't even. But it was two things for me. It was Rodney King first, and then it was Katrina that showed the plight of African Americans, where it was just, you saw those things on screen, you couldn't avoid them. So being that Katrina was that thing, talk about how that influence. That's a pretty tough thing to start on, but that's probably a fire drill right there. You're all hands on deck.
The irony is that it gave me a training ground of what to do if I'm ever in that position. So the irony is that it was a catastrophic moment. And I think society learned that, hey, this does not just affect the folks who have been displaced. Now your resources that you wanted to use for whatever you want to use for are now had to be put toward that. So if we could kind of come in a collaborative way of learning that it's going to affect us all, then we can be in a better place. And that's for the politicians to figure out. For me, I learned how to use the programs and know where those dollars were going and how it's going to influence people to get back on their feet. I enjoy doing that. Yeah. I actually ran a grant program where people apply for grants to get back on their feet. So I got a chance to sit to talk to them. I actually was responsible for looking at the buildings that were destroyed, and then they had to get built back up, be put back on and be sold. So I evaluated them. I looked at them, make sure they had running water, et cetera, et cetera. But I also saw that what it could be for families who wanted to work in a place like that. So it gave me hope to say, if I'm ever in a position to help to make a difference, I'll do that. And just to fast forward, when I got appointed at SBA, the first week on the job, the weather, we had bad tornadoes. I don't remember where the ice storms and all that hit. I was sent to Alabama and Mississippi to help the displaced folks get back on their feet. I was like, again, how ordained opportunity was this? But I learned how to do it because I first got hit with it as an intern coming into the federal government during the Bush administration. And
you learn from adversity, right? That's like in the worst case scenarios, that's where you always learn. That's why people shouldn't run away from these things. In Approach to China, the worst you can do is screw up, don't make the mistake again. So yeah, I absolutely think that it's the biggest part of life you can learn. And there's probably no bigger dumpster fire than the government, because there's so much out of your control, right? Like, for what it's worth, the levees broke, right? That is, there's no racism. The levees broke that shouldn't have been there in the first place. So we, as usual, we're cleaning up our own mess that as a government, we're supposed to protect people. That's what we decided to put in place. Now we were cleaning up the mess of what we created. That being said, as someone who spends much time in New Orleans, not many places have done such a good job of bouncing back with even more cultural influence and becoming more cultural dominant than New Orleans did. So you never hope for these things. But remember, they burned Atlanta to the ground, and Atlanta rose from the ashes. There are a lot of these times happens. Rome burned down a couple of times, and New Orleans did a great job bouncing back. So we covered a lot, in just 12 minutes. But when we get back from the break, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Small Business Administration, and then get into some of the stuff you're doing now. You've been listening to the Marketing Madman on Extra 106.3, and we will be right back. Good. That light is driving me crazy. Did we just do that all the time?
It started doing it in the middle of our podcast last week, but we just
No, we'll be fine.
Yeah, I was wondering about that. So I heard lightness. Maybe it was just the.
We'll be fine.
Okay. Good. There we go.
This one will be 23 minutes. I'm going to put my timer on also, just because I have such a zero sense of.
You text me the name of the owner of school. Yeah, school.
Well, This is probably now the 100th episode I've done, so I've gotten better at it, but it's still hard to know where you are. I mean, did you hear we covered fucking 15 topics in 12 minutes?
That's crazy. Yeah.
All right.
It was fun too.
Good, man. Okay. Ready to go?
Yeah, ready to go.
Welcome back to the Marketing Madman on Extra 106.3. I got my boy Cassius Butts here, and we covered a lot in round one. So we're going to start round two with the Small Business Administration. So small business is the lifeblood of this country. Doesn't matter what state you're in, what political leanings you are, everyone says it because most people have access to be part of a small business, right? They don't start like, I want to start $1 billion corporation. It just doesn't work that way. You start everything as a small business. So my question is, talk about the role that the SBA plays in that. Talk about how, in God's name, you were the first African-American to be appointed to that role. Because, I mean, this was recently in the scheme of life, and I don't know how that's even completely allowed. And then talk about how you were able to maximize lending for small business, because you have that pedigree of capital. And I think it's misunderstood. But at the same time, it is so essential to grow and to scale, and what takes small business to medium-sized and medium-sized to large. So I asked you a lot of questions. Let's start first with the role of small business, the SBA in this country.
Certainly. Well, over 99.4% of our economy runs off of small business. So what does that mean? Like when you see a Walmart, you see a Target, you see any of these big box stores, or Amazon, you see the big name, but within those stores are thousands of small businesses that makes things, whether it's the shirts we wear, the watches, the shoes, et cetera, et cetera. Those are
the people that come in and clean when they shut the door down. People that clean, the security guards that watch it. I mean, there's in everything we do that is small.
Everything we do is small business, and that gets overlooked a lot. And so what the SBA does, they try to get to get access to capital for folks who are looking to start or grow their business. Simplest put is just that. At one point in time, SBA used to actually disperse the loans to small businesses. Now they partner with financial institutions. They have their products inside those organizations. And so when I came into SBA, really at a time, Nick, that I think was really needed. What I mean by that, we had just come out of housing economy, the despair that we went through, and going into 2007, 8, and 9, and the change of administration when Barack Obama came into play. And it was interesting. So it was funny. I was interested in trying to support, really myself at that time, because I wanted to figure out what area do I really want to go into.
Yeah.
Because I was at HUD, and I said, do I want to stay in the government? Do I want to leave? And it really it's interesting. I met at that time Barack Obama. He came to Atlanta. He said, "You got a funny name like me," and it was kind of cool. He said, "If there's ever an opportunity to support me like you support me, I'll never forget that." That really happened. And I wasn't in it chasing to say, "Hell yeah, I think you guys should." I just was like, "Hey, this is pretty interesting."
I met Obama when Hillary Clinton was running. Don't ask me how, but I was working on her campaign in Nevada because Jimmy Carter's son was running for senator in that state, and somehow I got pulled into the Democratic Party. I was with Hillary Clinton, and I met Barack Obama in that same day with President Carter. And Obama wasn't to the point where he even passed Clinton yet. And I met him. I was like, "Whoa, dude!"
Yeah,
and it was something. You mentioned Manilow and little Al Green. Just the way he was kind of talking, I was like, "Whoa, dude! This is a different kind of dude." There was a little cadence. I felt a little bit. I got to meet Bill Clinton. Also, I felt a little bit about that same charisma, like he really cared. Yeah. I don't know if he really did, but he was able to make you think he did, and that's half the battle. So, okay, so you spent time at SBA. So first off, again, was it because Obama that you were the first black guy put in that role? Because it's crazy, man. There's been a lot of black African-American owned businesses in this country. How was that the first time?
And reason for, I didn't know it when I was appointed. The irony, I went to Washington. It's like, oh man, I'm thinking this is the final interview. There was a lot of people who were up for the role. And there's some folks who really looked out for me and looking to get there. I think for me, I got to Washington. They're like, "Oh yeah, so they're reading over my stuff." I'm like, "Yeah, so your grandfather ran for mayor in 1980. He was Republican." I was like, "Well, I guess I don't have this job." And then like, I was like, "Yeah, that's true." That's it. You're exactly who we want. Someone who work cross party lines, get stuff done. I was like,
the world lit on fire. Something just happened. Cross party lines. Oh, this must have been the 64. What was it? 1964. Wow.
So I was like, the only line I know is the green one. That's the only one I'm familiar with. It's the only one I'm interested in.
Yeah.
Let's make some great things happen. But in all seriousness, for me, it's because I've always had that mindset that government has to work for us, not against us. I wanted to be that one that made a difference, that didn't get involved in the minutiae stuff.
Yeah.
And just got.
And that role you were in allowed you to do that because you were on the street level, helping people directly. And most people don't understand, like, the money has already been, it's already been allocated. It just needs to be appropriated, right? It's there. We have the money. It's not pulling from our pockets. We already have allocated in previous years So it's appropriating the money now. Everyone thinks, oh, that's coming out of my pocket. No, that came out of your pocket 2 years ago, usually.
Even better, yeah, it came out of your pocket during tax year. My stump speak used to be, listen, I don't look at left or right or red to blue. I look at green access to capital is what runs our economy. We have a program in place at the SBD Center, Small Business Development Centers. If you go there, you can get one-on-one confidential counseling at no cost. And for all your listeners right now, you can do that today. I don't care where you are. I don't care what party you in. And you pay for it through your taxes. Take advantage.
That being said, I understand sometimes why people look at the government and say that's not possible. You can't get a hold of the IRS. They want your money, but somehow it's impossible to get a hold of a person. Yeah. So sometimes when you say those things, it's off-putting to people because like, wait a second, I can't even get a hold of somebody when they're trying to come get money from me. How would I go do this? So I see it, but you know, that's a good thing. Use those resources, especially to scale. Again, everybody can make a great idea. You can run a great business, but when it's time to scale, capital is necessary. Pointers are necessary. You go to a new market. Do you want to hire more employees? All these things are really hard. So I think that's a good point. Last, what were you able to do so well to get so much money in people's hands?
So I just went back with the process that I had many moons ago. And that's really engaging the community. And as you know, you do what you do. You're very successful at it. Know your audience. What I know is that people they want results. They want the capital. They want to know how to get it. They want to know how to scale. And so I put together these initiatives to have strategic alliances with organizations such as the Florida Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the Asian American Pacific Islander Initiative, the Georgia Minority Supplier Development Council. I can go on.
Yeah.
Did like almost 100 strategic community engagement relationships. And what that did was put all those members of those organizations got to learn more and more about SBA. And that's how we were able to scale. I mean, we backed over $30 billion.
And I would venture to guess that if you are part of something like the Minority Diversity Supplier Council, these things, you're already showing the initiative to be part of them, which means your success rate is probably higher anyway, because you've already showed the initiative. And I think one of the things that people get wrong, like when you're looking to start businesses, we don't need more $100 million, billion-dollar businesses. We need mom and pop shops that care and will go do things the right way. So people always want to start this next. Wait a second, there are plenty. We need more people to go and clean up these shopping centers and security guards and plumbers. We need so many more of these things. We need more plumbing businesses. Because ultimately, when there's not, competition is out and things get more expensive for consumers. So we don't always have to start these billion-dollar ideas. Humble beginnings usually get you far. And in today's day and age, you know, we need plumbers, electricians. Those prices have gone to the roof because everyone send their kids to college. And every asshole's coming home with a community liberal arts degree. And what does that do for you?
Not a whole lot. It's like until you invest in your time, the things that you're passionate about is what you really should invest your time and your attention into. And I didn't know that I was the first African American in this role until the person by the name of Mac Milborn, who owns, you know, the most profitable Popeyes, the world's most profitable Popeyes, he said, you know, you're the first African American in this role. I said, no, I had no clue. I generally had no clue. But my mentor at that time was his best friend. At that time was Maynard Jackson.
That'll do it.
I had no clue. All I knew is that I was there to do a job, do it well, and leave things better than what you found.
That's all you can ask for, brother. That's all you can ask for. So we've talked about Governor Kemp before. Let's go to the state level now. So as a Yankee coming down here, and I've been here pretty much only during his term, I've had the chance to meet him a couple of times. He catches you off guard. The aloofness that he has is an act that he puts on to lull you in, but he's much sharper and he cares much more that he, I think, gets credit for. And I think it's starting to come into the public eye. I think when he believes in something, he stands by it. I think that he's strong-willed in the good way. And I think when he talks about his family, he truly cares about his family and they influence his decisions. So that's just my apolitical 30,000 foot about him. You got the chance to work with him. Tell me some things about him that, one, that you were proud of, that you worked with him on, but two, that you learned about him through the process.
I definitely have to say, Nick, the first thing about Governor Kemp, he gives a lot of credit, not just for his supporters, but really his wife, Marty. Marty Kemp has been really the backbone of everything that Governor Kemp does. And so you will very rarely ever see Governor Kemp without Marty, but not in front, not in back, but by his side. So with that being said, is that they typically have an approach on saying, hey, what can we do? What's best for Georgia? During the pandemic, perfect example, you know, there were not a lot of folks who were saying, hey, we need to keep businesses, you know, closed. The pandemic's happened. Governor Kemp's like, no, we need to keep businesses open because a lot of these businesses, whether they're black or brown, small, women-owned, et cetera, they need to be open. They're small business.
That's the life.
So there's no coincidence that 10 years in a row, Georgia is #1 in the union to do business because Governor Kemp had that foresight. No matter what you think about it, you can't take that from him. And so what do you say? One of the things that most people don't see coming, you know, what you see is what you get. It's very genuine. But when you see him like on television, he's always the same way when the cameras are not on. I think for me, I got a chance to get to know him better through my buddy Dallas Smith, who introduced us and said, "Hey, I think you can do some fantastic things for us. Can you come up with a plan for a small minority business for the state of Georgia?" When he got elected, and asked me to do it, and I did it, and I helped to come up with a plan. And so whenever someone asks and you come up with a plan, you deliver. Next thing you know, Governor Kim created an initiative called the supplier diversity manager for the state of Georgia. It's never been in place before, but he created it. That doesn't get the headlines, but it lets you know that beyond the politics that people think, that there's going to always be a conscious decision that he's going to make, that how is this going to affect not the folks just inside 285, but the folks outside of 285.
But also laying foundation for the future, which seems more politicians want the right now. They don't think about the future. That is a future looking forward goal, even after his term, that is going to lay impact. So I think that's really important. I also think your ground level approach is what differentiates you, right? There's two kinds of people in life. It's really hard to be both. One's really good at 30,000 foot and one's really good at execution. Sure. Getting it from 30,000 foot to being executed is really hard to do. It sounds like the diversity experience you have allowed you to write plans, but not just plans that were over people's heads, that were easy to execute, that you could follow a plan to execute. And that's probably been an important thing in your career, I have to imagine. That's not an easy skill set to have.
It's been something I take a lot of pride in, but one thing I'm familiar with, Nick, is I didn't do it or get here by myself. And I'm fortunate to be appointed as chairman of Fort McPherson by Governor Kim, which we sold the property to Tyler Perry and TD Rev Company. And you figure Tyler Perry, one of the most notable African Americans in this world, that we're able to sell that property for him to flourish. That's not by coincidence. That was very specific because he said, "This is what I want to do." Great. I'm just glad to be in a position to help to lead that effort.
And everybody won. And that doesn't always happen. Everybody won. The state won. The community won.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fortunate and proud to be on the Georgia Department of Economic Development. We get to see all the businesses that come into the state.
Yeah.
I was most recently appointed to the Georgia Tourism Foundation.
Yeah.
For the state.
When do you sleep?
I've been sleep. I got time to do it when I'm dead. I don't get time, man. We got work to do, man.
That's a lot of appointees, man. I feel.
But you know what? The best part.
I host a podcast.
But when you're making the difference and when you're helping to change the trajectory of someone else's life, I mean, I thrive off of it. Knowing that you're changing someone's livelihood, literally by helping them with either its access to capital or opportunity or resources that they may not have known about, no matter how educated you are. Some people just don't know.
Isn't it a shame we're in a world, and I've seen a great graphic, I'm sure you've seen it, and it's just the iceberg, and it shows like the tip of the iceberg is social media, and it's like, this is what people see. And then you go under and it's all the struggle and all the strife and all the no's and all the rejection, and it's just underwater, but they got to put out the little tip of the iceberg. You know, they got to put that out to everybody, for everybody to see. That's why I joke all the time. It's like, yeah, you know that guy that tells you they win $1 million whenever they gamble? They don't tell you when they lose the $2 million the other times that they go gambling, right? Like this is how it works. So let's talk a little bit about Global Leader Group. I've had a chance to do some business with you guys, spend some time with you guys. Talk about, giving capital is one thing. Talk about the role of the company. Sure. Talk about why it's different than traditional banks or private equity or things like that. Just talk about kind of how the company operates. Because again, I think that'll set us up well for the book and then the rest of the stuff you're doing.
Certainly. So Global Leader Group, we call ourselves kind of like a group of Avengers. So we have folks who've actually served in worldwide leadership roles at HSBC, which is our CEO. Our CEO was a national executive with HSBC as well too. We have folks who are out of Canada, Toronto, Asia, UK, here in the States, obviously. But we have divisions. One is leading efforts around consulting, our learning division. We have an effort that is specific to capital, which is the part that I lead, and also search. And we're looking for executives to find opportunities to fill executive roles. And so we like to say, like I said, we're a group of Avengers that use our skill set, our relationship and resources to help other businesses and other people to scale. That's the bottom line. Yeah. It's really not that confusing or complex. It really is just that simple. And so glad to be there. I've been on there for 3 years now as an equity partner within our capital division. But the proud part about it is exactly when you see people get the opportunity to scale, when they get the opportunity to get a contract in the business, they say, hey, I was part of that. I was involved in that. And so
like local to regional, you need resources, but it's not super hard, right? National to multinational is incredibly hard, which is what I was thinking immediately when you brought up all the different places you guys are. Like doing business in London is very different than the US and even Canada, right across the border. With every treaty we have, it's very different doing business there. So that's why you've developed a group of global people, because if you want to scale to the next level, you're not going to be able to just wake up one day and be like, you know what, I'm going to go conquer Asia. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
Yeah, that's great. So talk about some clients that you do work with. Talk about some success stories, some things you're proud about there. it doesn't have to be, they name names, but just some of the examples of things you're doing there and kind of how you guys market yourselves. Because I have to imagine that elite that you're going after, that CMO, that CEO, those big companies, right? They're not looking at Instagram. I have to imagine that's an interesting place. You got to be at a lot of networking events and speaking events, right?
No, certainly. I mean, in fact, we were just talking before we came on, leaving to go to New York to meet with some folks from that's an InsurTech. It's a huge insurance conference taking place in New York, and then they have the second part of that taking place in Vegas in a couple of months. So we're helping a business scale up to get to that next level. We've connected them with a couple of investors who are looking to invest into the company, which is great for them. Again, changing lives, so that's something huge. We have another client who's out in New York who owns several hotels and is looking to refinance one of his hotels here in Georgia, owns several businesses in South America and in Asia. And so again, helping them with the access to capital to refinance part of his business is something we love doing.
Yeah.
And of course, last but not least, even on the consulting side, with our learning division, we help businesses how to figure out how to do things better and more efficiently. And we do that because we've actually been in those roles. Yeah. Right. And so, everyone from our CEO, Jonathan Nabrowski, to Elizabeth Oates, our COO, Joe Nabrowski. These are folks who've lived and worked all over the world, from Switzerland to China to Canada, and here, obviously, in the States. We're glad to be in a place where we're following our passion, Nick. That's the bottom line.
Love it.
We're following our passion.
Love it. And I have to imagine your sources become more valuable in the state of the economy we're in, right? When money was free and it was easy to get money, it was pretty easy for everybody to get money, which is why we grew at such a rapid pace, but which is also why we read all this inflation and it was getting willy-nilly with money. So I have to imagine now that things have tightened, all of a sudden these people that we would never need are coming back pretty quickly. Like, it's not as easy anymore.
No, it's not. But the great part about it is when we have a relationship with those folks who are making decisions, it makes it a little bit easier.
For sure. Yeah. For sure. And you were there for them when it started. Absolutely. All right. So let's get to it. So exceptional being the exception to the rule. So you wrote a book.
Yeah.
You wrote a book. You told me right away, it's not like most books. It's a quick read. Sit your ass down and read it.
That's right.
Talk about it. I'm mostly curious because we probably covered a lot of the content. I'm mostly curious in what it was like going on the book tour, promoting the book, how you market it, how you got it out there. Because one of the things I've noticed, it used to be really hard to write a book. You need to get publishing deals in advance. Now I know a lot of people. I was actually offered, someone's like, hey, you should convert your podcast into a book. I can show you how to do it. And I was like, whoa, I didn't even know I could write coherent sentences. What do you mean write a book? But talk about how that has changed, because I think it's a lot of insight for people. You went through the process and promoted. Talk about that ordeal. Yeah. So for me, it was something that I really wanted to do, to be in a position to give back. I mean, I just was like, okay, how can I write something that's impactful, that's going to make a difference in someone else's life? And so Charles Johnson, there's a book, Who Moved My Cheese, came out many years ago. I think it's 113 pages. This book has been reproduced, I think 120 something times throughout the entire world in like 47 different languages. And so I wanted to write something short, to the point, impactful. So it's like 14 chapters from everywhere from finding your passion to checking your ego before it checks you, to planting seeds and know when it's harvest time, working as an intern. I could go on, but all of these chapters are chapters that I've either experienced or have one-on-one interactions with, whether it's Senator John McCain, whether it was Mayor Kasim Reed, whether it was Barack Obama, right. George, I can go on, Condoleezza Rice. I mean, these are all folks who I've actually interacted and had some either tools or some lessons from. Dr. Lewis Lynn, who's my mentor, he owned a business and still owns it. He's also the board trustee for Clemson University. Wow. And also with Truist. And so he was the one who said, hey, Cassius, you really need to kind of own in and just follow with the things that you're really passionate about. And so I did that. And I wrote the book. And so how it happened, Nick, I mean, for me, it was a little bit unconventional. I pulled out my iPhone and I sat down, had a little beverage, and said, let me just start thinking about topics I want to talk about. So I wrote out like 10 to 15 titles, and I just started talking about those particular topics and recording myself. And I record myself, and then I had to transcribe into chapters. There you go. So now, there was no ghostwriter. It was me. Right. Seeing ghosts at night sometimes, right? Just thinking about the memories. Right. But you're speaking a language from a language that people understand. Yes. You're not talking down to people. You're speaking at eye level. That's right. Like a conversation we're having now. It's one of the reasons I won't use headphones when I do this. Yeah. Because when you have headphones on, you're not talking to a person. You're talking to the machines, and you're talking there. So you, with scotch in your hand, I assumed it was scotch. I just think that's what writers drink. But with scotch in your hand, talking is it's more applicable. It's more palatable. It's more natural. It's more organic. And I have to imagine, even from what I read of it, that connectability is important, especially quickly, because people have to decide if they're going to read that book very quickly. And they don't want someone that's talking down to them. A lot of these business books, they catch you with the first paragraph like they care. Then all of a sudden they're talking down to you the rest of the time. Right. That's right. No, I speak in a way that's like, look, I've been in the same places where you are. And in fact, I'm still in some of those places.
I just try to do things consistently to actually get to the next level. I just want to follow my passion, whatever that is. I want to do the things that I'm supposed to do in this world. So when I'm gone, I can check all those boxes and say, yeah, I did it. And hopefully somebody else can do the same thing.
I did it. Yeah, it's a great way. And I think, I think a lot of times the problem with these books are they're like, hey, you're making $12 an hour now. I can teach you to make $1 million. It's like, no, you can't. Let's start with getting from $12 an hour to $20 an hour. Yeah. And then from 20 to 30, right? You're not going to wake up one day and go from McDonald's to CEO. It's not going to happen. And especially in the world nowadays. So let's be realistic with the approach, right? Consistency is the number one thing. It's not preached. No one talks about it. Do the same thing. Plan on doing it 200 times before you even think it's worth a damn. You're not going to be good at something right away. And if you are, you should have been good at it a long time ago because you had some natural talent in you.
That's right.
So that's what I learned about books. And I've read a lot of them. Some of the classics hold up for a reason. There's really good people, but most people who are writing these really long books, they got 200 people working on these books. They got research departments. It's not that speaking. So, well, good for you. What was the touring like? Were you on book tours?
Yeah.
What was the interacting with people? Did you meet people that read it and it changed them? Did you hear those stories?
Man, I did, and I'm still hearing them. Actually, going to Orlando, speaking there, doing a fireside chat. Did a fireside chat with JP Morgan a couple of weeks ago. And really enjoyed that. And so again, I have one coming up with Google.
Cool.
And so for me, it's like when people read about it, they're like, "Hey, what you just said, I can really relate. Like, how did you go through that?" That's it. Look, it's just take the moment to be vulnerable. People want to talk about success. Yeah, get that. I talk about my failures.
Yeah,
most of my book is talk about the things I failed in. It talks about when I tripped, when I failed, when I got rejected. But it talks about, hey, surround yourself with mentors and people who can help to build you back up. I mean, the first chapter is kind of like damn in your face. It talks about me when I'm backing out of a car. The day before I'm graduating from high school, and I hit a little girl. I run her over. Literally, I thought she was dead. And I'm like, I don't even remember graduating because I was in such a state shock. I was like, God, if this little girl survives, okay, well, I'm going to do whatever it needs. I got to do to get back on my feet. Unbeknownst to me, later, like 10 minutes later, she's yelling and screaming. She just had a hairline fracture. She was okay. But for me, it's like, oh my gosh, this is really a miracle. I've got to do something that's going to be the betterment for people. And so for me, like the first chapter talks about following your passion.
I mean, that started with vulnerability if I've ever heard it.
Yeah. It's like
most people would just pretend like that never happened. I'll be like, it was a dog. What are you talking about?
No, it was me. And so to this day, I still park, when I look at the rear view mirror, it takes me like 2-3 minutes to make sure nothing's around me. So really the bottom line,
you learn from your mistake.
You learn
from your mistake.
And so, it's Abraham Maslow's theory of hierarchy that I really base it off of. And I base it off of self-actualization. When you find out who you are, what you are, and what you're supposed to do in this life, no matter what you do, no matter what anyone says, follow your passion, screw everybody else. This is what you're supposed to do. And if you do that, you'll feel successful. You'll be fulfilled. I
agree with it. If people ask, the two most important things I say are 1, self-awareness, and 2, situational awareness. You have to know yourself, and you have to know in each situation what the course of action is.
That's right.
Right. And it sounds like some James Bond stuff, and I learned it from Archer actually, but it's situational awareness. That's what differentiates people. Situational awareness. All right. So we're going to come back. We're going to talk about teaching at Morehouse and giving all this knowledge back. So you've been listening to the Marketing Madman on Extra 106.3, and we will be right back. Right on time.
That's cool. Perfect.
Right on time.
Perfect.
All right. So we're gonna change this up a little bit, and we're gonna pretend like I'm a student, and I'm gonna ask you some questions.
Okay.
But we'll open it with just talking a little bit about what you learned from your students and how it's changed from when you went. And then in the end, I'll ask a couple of questions, and we'll end on that. If we go long, we go a little long, but I think we covered a exorbitant amount of information.
Okay. That sounds good.
Chloe, how we doing, girl? This one's 9. Then you can podcast.
There you go. That's Chuck.
Yeah.
He's got it.
What's he gonna do, man? He's been vocal about being pissed off about that's all.
Yes.
And you're talking like, hey, a couple $100,000 is a differentiator. And they wrote a bad contract. I heard a turnover, a bad contract that they didn't really have the rights that they said they did. I mean, this shit's all fucked up. And I've been looking at them too, but you're supposed to know this stuff. Anyway, all right, let's rock and roll.
Yeah, here we go.
All righty then. Let me hit my button too, otherwise. Welcome back to the Marketing Madman on Extra 106.3. Cassius Butts and Nick Constantino. We're finished up our conversation. We covered a lot. We talked books. We talked government. We talked about finding your passion, doing things incremental, just being in habitual and doing things in habits. So let's talk about Morehouse. So now you get to give back. So you're an adjunct professor. Talk about what you're teaching. Talk about what your kids are teaching you, because I think probably you wouldn't think you were going to do some teaching, but you learned a thing or two from these students. And look, I think the HBCUs have been brought into the forefront and the good that they've done. They've been doing good for a long time, man.
Yeah.
I went to DC. I was around Howard kids all the time. It was a different world. I won't tell you about the time I went to Howard homecoming, but it did happen. But that was another day. I was Puerto Rican, by the way.
There you go.
But go talk a little bit about it. Talk a little bit about teaching and with a class you're teaching, what you get from these kids.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Dick. So first and foremost, I mean, I'm just glad to be in a position to teach. My grandmother was an educator. She taught at Temple and Notre Dame and
Wow.
Abundance Xavier. My brother, Portland, he taught at University of Northern Iowa, so on. So I come from that place where we just enjoy giving back. So teach leadership and professional development at Morehouse. Only have time to teach one class, but I enjoy it so much. It's more or less, first of all, the class is written off of the premise of my book, Exceptional.
Oh, cool.
And so we get to learn the practical situations of the book. I spent a lot of time bringing in executives, CEOs, executives in the room for them to get real live one-on-one experiences and hear about what's really going on out there. And so I think they really, really do enjoy that. But for me, I laugh because, one of our last discussions we had, I'm like, okay, tell me what's going on with Drake and what's going on with K-Dot, Tell me what's going on. I said, no, Professor Butts. Oh, let me tell you. So this is how it started. So they're telling me everything. And they know it. They're right. And so we actually did a whole segment of class talking about how you can be good at one thing and someone else can be good at it. What are you going to use your talent for? Are you going to use it to tear down? Or are you going to use it to scale up? And so the conversations that come out of those interactions are just invaluable. And so
but applicable to business. I mean, for my goodness gracious. I mean, that is the rest of your life. You have competitors. You're going to have competitors that are going to be better than you, that are going to disappear, that are going to come in. And, I'm in general, a rising tide lifts all ship, guys, especially when you're in industries that are in the downfall. And no offense, hip hop's big time on the downfall and it has been for a long time. Just as an art form and an industry, we'll save that for another podcast. But yeah, I think that's great. It's really applicable to say, because that's adversity. What if someone's coming at you? Right. What are you going to do? What's your response going to be? Right. There's only two ways to handle it, right? You're going to go in, you're going to fight back harder, or you're going to let it blow by you. There's no real other way. So again, that's applicable.
It's applicable, but push back just a little bit. I think hip hop has not necessarily gone on the downfall. I think it's evolving because when you take hip hop to the part of where it becomes an art, is when you can see someone like Kendrick Lamar who actually wins a Pulitzer Prize for his work as a hip hop artist. He's
one of the last good ones. I'll leave it at that. He's the New Yorker from the 90s that was born in Queens, who spent a lot of time listening to the good ones. He is one of the good ones. I'll take him. I'll take some J. Cole right now. I'm not really happy with the rest of them, if I'm being honest. But anyway, another conversation for another time.
Andre 3000, you could throw them all in.
Yeah, you could. He hasn't made than his flute record, and I was stupid enough to listen to it, and it was fun for like the first 6 minutes, and I realized I listened to a pan flute for anyway.
So to your point, that's what the class is about: leadership and professional development. And we don't talk about just being at ABC company, at IBM, whatever. What do you do when you come in? No, we talk about what are you going to do when you're in real life situations. How are you going to use your integrity? How are you going to use transparency? How are you going to use your leadership skills to actually get through a situation? I mean, I was in a situation most recently, and I just celebrated my 30-year reunion at Morehouse, and I'm glad to serve as an advisor on the Department of Business and Economics for Morehouse as well, too. And so it was our 30-year anniversary, and it was like, okay, what are we going to do? We're known as a legendary class in '94. And so, for that, not a term I came up with specifically, something that was just out there. But my point is that we are in a position where we give back. Our class is giving back more money than any other class in the history of Morehouse College, in the history of Morehouse, because we want other people to have the same experiences that we had. So I try to teach the students, hey, when you get out there, don't forget to reach back. That's just the bottom line. Yeah. It's really just that simple.
Yeah. And then you're talking about a very strong community-based organizations, HBCUs as a whole. You're talking about the 90s were a very different time than they are now for them. They were not looked at the same way they are now. I think people have finally acknowledged how important they are to the African-American community, how big of a point it is. You don't reach many people, meet many people that went to an HBCU that don't wear that with a very big, bright, flamboyant shirt that they're so proud of that. And I think that is something that we've just started to lean into. That's incredibly important. I think it's important for anybody, right? You go to any kind of school or any organization, your church. Most people, they're not for church necessarily for the religion. They're there for the community. And that's why they so proudly are aware from that community. So I think it's a differentiator, right? I think you will find there's a study done, and it's not that religious people do better in life, but because they're always around a community and a support network, they tend to do better. So they try to falsely correlate it and say it's because they believe in God. No, it's because they're always around a community. That's right. So that community that came from 94 from Morehouse probably has led a lot of the influence in what you've been able to do. And you could trace it back to 1994 in that instance. So now you're in a position to put people in that same place to hopefully give more money, more time, more effort back to the school and keep perpetually growing.
That's right. I mean, you hit it right on. And now I'm going to make sure that you are going to be one of our guest speakers. You got to come here.
Just because of that monologue.
They would love that. And They would not care wherever you came from, what you look like. They love that you're there because you're very straight, you're very direct in your approach. And that's what they need. They need real life experiences. So again, for me, that's been something I really enjoyed. I also serve as vice chairman of the board at Morris Brown College, which is now in a position. They're going to have over 400 students in the fall. They're back on its feet. It's a lot of great things happening despite what's taking place in the climate today's world. And so, that just makes the media, man. I'd rather hear from you and what's going on the street level. The media is going to take everything. The propensity of people is to always amplify the negative. It's an actual physiological response. I'm not going to hold it against it. So tell me this. So when you're talking about what do you think can be done to help fix the education system? So here's what I do know, right? We're giving away too many liberal arts degrees. We're giving too many degrees to people that are not applicable to the skill set that is required to succeed. And in the simplest form, we are building sheep. We're not building entrepreneurs. We're not building small business owners. We're building people who believe they should show up for 40 hours. If they're lucky, maybe they get 20, complain about how hard they're working, even though they're doing nothing. How do we fix the education system so that next generation takes the mantle? Because, trending down wise, you start to see some kinks in the armor as a country. Right. The best part about the education system that I think that students can get out is really the networking and knowing other students who are just as competitive as they are. Being in a place where that competition, I learned the same back when I was in graduate school, is that competition doesn't create character. It reveals it. And so when you're in a position where you're being competitive against someone else, now what are you going to do with you? Okay, you beat this person. You got a higher grade. You got a bigger internship. Now what? Are you going to pave the way for someone else, or are you just going to say, oh, I got you? So for me... and did you just motivate that person that you just passed to be better than you? Because it doesn't always work that way. You can't rest on your laurels. If you're not consistently trying to be better, that's the difference between Luka Doncic. Let's just throw it out there. I mean, that dude should not be the best player in the NBA. There's no way. He doesn't even look like he could run a 40 in under 6 seconds, but he is. And you know why? Because someone told him he couldn't. And some kid beat him when he was 16 and he just kept trying to get better. So I agree with you. I think competition is huge, but you also got to know how to nurture competition and not make it so it's obnoxious, because there are people who are obnoxious with it too. Well, what you just gave was the solution of how do we actually fix the education system. The same thing we talk about hip hop. You evolve it. You evolve education to having more real hands-on approaches, real live internships, real hands-on opportunities for students to get real life experiences, and then take that back to the classroom and say, this is what I've learned. So the rest of your peers can learn. The professors like myself can say, glad to see you do that. I can talk about more like real life situations. Love it. And everyone wins. That's just about it. Love it. And again, you're not going anti-education, right? You're saying that we need more practical application to prepare these kids for the life that they are going to enter. Yes. Right. And I think, when I went to college, I went to University of Maryland to the R.H. Smith School of Business. It was the top 15 business school in the country. I got a lot of that, but I didn't get as much as I wanted. You know what I got a lot of? How to calculate net present value of a stock. Do you think I need to do 30 pages on net present value? Do you think that they could have thought in 2004 that AI was going to do all this work for me? You would have thought they should have, because I wasted a lot. But you know what? I was in a fraternity. I learned business. I was around a lot of people. I chased a lot of women. I did a lot of things that have taught me a lot of things in life. So I will take that for what it is. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed our time together. We are right on time to end this one. You've been listening to the Marketing Madman on Extra 106.3. Thank you, Cassius. I appreciate it, brother. Glad to be here. All right, Chloe.